All right, we are live. Welcome to FMA discussion episode 75. Believe it or not, already going on a calendar year. Tonight we are featuring Master Bram Frank, who's was heavily voted in to get to come on the show. So we're doing it. So how are you, sir?
I'm very good. That's really cool. I was heavily voted in. Thank you, all of
Ye-
you. I really
Yeah, yeah,
appreciate that.
definitely. No, no, for sure, definitely got. Because what I do is when I get referrals, so I have a kind of like a running list of
Right.
people when they send referrals in. And what I do is if I get the referral like more than once, I tend to push that person up, up, up. So
Oh,
needless to
cool.
say, I had intentions of getting you on just for your knives and the book, and your books. So it just so happened sooner than later, but it's a good thing. So
Oh, you know what? I didn't realize I can see the side. It says Frank Shikoski. Hey, Frank. Frank just said
oh,
hello.
good.
I
Oh,
didn't
yeah,
know I
yeah.
could
Good, good,
see
good.
that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right.
Oh,
Yeah, right in
okay.
Connecticut. Right in
By
Connecticut.
the way, Misha's going to get a hold of you because he wants to know how you do these because we do our Zoom stuff and he
Okay.
likes how you do this. So, anyways, he'll be able. Anyways, all of you, before I don't say something. I know this is a lot. Some of you know just a basic idea of who I am. One, I'm a very strange individual. I'm a unique, weird person. I understand that I'm weird, and you'll have to pardon me. I know my glasses keep picking up reflection, but my eyes are tired, and if I don't have them on, I can't actually see the screen. So
Yeah, no
please,
worries.
so oh, you know what? Maybe nope, that didn't take away. I had television in the background just to help light that side. Oh, but so I apologize for my glasses if they pick up.
Oh, no, no,
Yeah.
no, 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 no,
Okay.
no.
So way back, when Black Belt came to interview me, I had no idea they were interviewing me for any special purpose. This guy just called up and started talking to me, and I was about to blow him off, and I just answered his questions, and he said, "Look, I'm doing it for some future interview," and I went, "Okay," and we talked and we talked and we talked. And he goes, "Oh my God, you're older than I thought," and I'm like,
Not exactly what you
"That's
wanted to
not what."
hear,
Yeah,
but
exactly. So I want my parents are both, educated. And my dad is the late Robert Gould, the artist illustrator, and he came up where you had to learn about restoring, worked in restoring paintings and that kind of stuff. That
mm,
got him into restoring uh, prints. And they used to find that they would take Japanese prints and Chinese prints because they're rice paper, and people had no regard for them back then, in the 30s, 40s, 50s, especially with everything with the wars. And so they used them to stuff them behind paintings to absorb moisture, like rice paper, like using rice to
mm.
absorb moisture from a phone. And my dad recovered some, and he so fell in love with them. Over time, he learned and taught Chinese and Japanese brush painting at Yale. So I got exposed to all these different people. In that growing up, I was brought up that all good Jewish kids have to know something good. So I wanted to be an archaeologist for arms and armor. And I loved going to the Metropolitan. I got to meet my father's friends who, you know, talked about uh, Asian-based martial arts systems. Because obviously, I still have a couple of the prints. People walking to go would think that they're fake. And I grew up with two of them that my dad saved his whole life. And one is Musashi's, one is Two Warriors. And they're actually real Japanese prints from like the 1600s that he found stuffed in the back of paintings. And of course, the museum didn't care what they did with the stuff
Mm.
stuff in the back. So I grew up with that kind of stuff. So I always liked all that. And they had a very dear friend of theirs. I don't remember Ajah's last name. I do remember he's from India. And he started teaching me about the old Vedic heroes. I was very little. I was probably, 3 or 4 years old when he was doing this. And I remember most going through as a young person, like through middle school. We always saw Ajahn. We ate at his house. He came to our house, and he told me about he did Indian martial art. I don't know which one because I was too
Mm.
little to know. Kali Parata, whatever is the main generic term for Indian, martial art. But he helped inspire me. And of course, my mom liked all of that. So I was always, making swords and shields and working with my dad. And then when Kennedy came in and started the Green Berets, the boyfriend of the woman who lived next door, the young lady who babysat for us and took care of the house. I mean, we lived in a small community. All the older brothers and sisters got to take care of everybody else. So her boyfriend, Paul Van Stone, he went into the Green Berets, and he was my hero because Paul did everything, and he was the big kid on the block. And so when he'd come home, he would teach me what he was learning on the front lawn, all the way through basic, all the way through his first tour. He was also my first, came home in a black bag with a toe tag. But he started me on that. And then, of course, some of you may know that there's still lots of anti-Semitism and weird stuff going on. So Alex Sternberg, who was part of the Jewish Defense League back then, who on his own, he taught something called Combat Shotokan, and he used to go to the Jewish temples and the Jewish community centers, and he would teach. And the family next door, their son had been doing it. And, I was interested. I said, what does it do? And like any typical kid to a kid, he goes stand there and he measures his distance, and then he blows his punch into my chest. And I thought my chest died. Of course, both parents were upset. Everyone's going, oh, what's going on? And my first thought was, oh my God, is that freaking cool? What are you learning? So I started going to class with him. And my mother talked to people, said if I did that, it was going to ruin my hands and never be an artist. I should take something like judo. And one of the places there was offering judo. I went, I don't want judo. And, Alex Sternberg, because he was teaching what he called it back then, the formulation of his Combat Shotokan was pretty easy. And he wanted to make sure no Jewish kids could get beat up. Well, that sort of opened the door. So in around 63, I started. In 65, I actually started training martial arts. Now, to go back to the interview with Black Belt, when he heard that, he goes, are you telling me when Lyndon Johnson was our president, you were doing martial arts? I said, everyone thought I was weird. No one wanted to know about it, but yeah. So, and on the Black Belt, just so you know, I'm visiting my mom in 2007. Now I'll get back to how I got. And I get a call from my Black Belt students going, congratulations. I'm like, congratulations for what? They go, well, don't you know you're Black Belt's Weapons Instructor of the Year? And I'm like, who's Black Belt's Weapons Instructor of the Year? So I'm in Connecticut. I go with my mom, because most of you know I live in Florida. I go to Barnes and Noble. There's an issue. It's not the issue about the Hall of Fame. So I go, do you have the new issue? He checks and goes, yeah, it's in the back room, but we don't put it out till like Thursday or something. I'm like, I need to know if I'm in it. Can I see a copy? No. But I was told that I'm in it. He goes, no. I said, please. So I begged the guy. He goes and gets it. And instead of being a good Jewish kid going from back to front, I would have said, oh my God. I start from the front. Let me tell you, Dean, my mom's going, don't be upset. Don't get hurt if you're not in it. And I'm flipping the pages and I'm flipping the pages. Nothing. Turns out the very last few pages of this issue are the Hall of Fame. So I get to the Hall of Fame and it's got Person of the Year and Fighter of the Year and whatever, Self-Defense of the Year, which turned to be Mike Kinerick. And I'm like, I can't believe it. And the last two pages, the one facing me directly on the right-hand side is Posthumous Larry Hartzell. And the other page, I look and it says Bram Frank, Weapon Instructor of the Year. And there's the guy, I start to glance at it, the guy going, I was talking to Bram, he had no idea what this interview was about. Did you know he started when Lyndon Johnson was president? He'd actually put that in. Wow. And he started to list the things, and I'm like, and it took a lot for me to get the guy to sell me the issue. And then as I traveled the next few days, I picked up a few more. Black Belt calls and goes, why didn't you take out an ad? And I went, I didn't even know I was in the issue. No one said, by the way, interview for Black Belt. Did you know this is the final interview for being named? Now, on that note about Modern Arnis, Remy was in Black Belt's Hall of Fame, Black Belt Magazine's Hall of Fame twice, just like Guru Dan. So Remy was Instructor of the Year and then Weapons Instructor of the Year. And I find it sort of ironic in a way that he's known as the man with the sticks. It's a stick art for most people. And Hock Hockheim, Kelly Warden, and myself have all been from Modern Arnis, Weapons Instructor of the Year in Black Belt, and we're all knife guys. So out of this stick art, people go, well,
Matter of fact, because that's one of the questions.
The images that Remy only did sticks. So that means Modern Arnis occupies 4 out of 15 times they've awarded it. And 3 of us are modern East, and I count Mike Janich, who was also in there, because, Mike's obviously a knife guy. Mike says, because he trained with Remy for a little bit. Michael got to train with lots of people.
Okay.
But again, so I call it, so 3.5 of us, not counting Remy, or with Remy, 4.5 of us in weapons instructor, we're knife guys. And people go, you guys do modern arnis? I went, yes. Well, it's a stick art. And I go, well, that's a strange thing, because Kelly found, loved knives. Hawk ended up doing, the American Congress of Knives, because he's a knife guy. And Remy always encouraged, because I'm the bolo guy with the legacy of the Presas bolo. But so I ended up, I always wanted, but just as that little bit in there, that's one of those oddities. I look and go, if you want to know how real modern arnis is, Black Belts Hall of Fame is not easy. It used to be you could get your students to vote for you. Then they started just doing due diligence. You don't vote for anyone. Because a certain instructor whose name I won't use, they saw he followed the rules and he bribed his way in, having his own students, thousands of them, call him in.
Geez.
And I was the next year where they actually had to vet you. They had to do due diligence. Same thing in a couple of these big Grandmaster Halls of Fame. Because of that jerk, I tested for hours, just like I was doing a black belt test to prove who I was.
In place.
Which is okay. I'd rather have to prove it. But anyway, so Monarnese, what people think, was good to me about doing weapons. But when I went from doing combat Shotokan, and because I was exposed to, through my parents, Asian arts, and I did brush painting, and I learned how to make, my dad, I had to make my own paints, my own colors, all the stuff I used to bitch at my dad. I used to make my own paper. I had to do it old style because he was old style. He didn't want me drawing comics with Jack Kirby and those guys, but Frank Frazetta was okay. He's originally grew up and they all had real jobs. Art did not pay them a lot. Frank Frazetta only got $100 a painting. That doesn't make you famous. Rich. He obviously. So my dad had a real job, and he worked with people like Walt Kelly, who did pogo. And knew Charles Schultz, peripherally. So I've been around Peanuts since the 50s. And pogo was in the house. And like I said, when I'd run away to Marvel Comics to see Jack and those guys, my dad would freak out and go, "You will not be a comic artist." But it taught me about pixels and colors. And then I'll go back to how I teach and how I organize stuff. But with all of it going on, I found out through them that I could study Kung Fu, Chinese arts. And there's something about Chinese arts and the flow that always caught me. So combat Shotokan, I knew it was self-defense and stuff, but I wanted to learn. So I started learning Hungar. And the instructors eventually, back then, Jerome Mackey, what Jerome Mackey did was come into town, because he was a great judo competitor and part of that whole bit. He would go into town and find who are the best instructors in the area, hire them, and that's what that location taught, as well as judo. So he opened a branch down in Stamford, Connecticut, down, about an hour from our house, 45 minutes to an hour. And they were going to offer Hungar, because you couldn't be a white kid and go to Chinatown. That wasn't going to happen, believe me.
So,
and you were talking in the 60s. So
right.
I started learning Hungar from this young man, and I took to it like the proverbial duck to water. And then the instructor, and then of course they tried to encourage me to do judo and other stuff, sign up for other programs. I went, no. This guy was ahead of his time. We actually had little slide cards, that said who we were, ID cards. This back in the 60s.
Yeah, for the 60s.
Yeah. So the instructor gets hurt, and they bring in this little kid who wears platform shoes and the bowl haircut, sort of Beale style, because he's from Hong Kong. And I'm like, who are you? And he's not caring when he's teaching. I can see his heart is not in this. Now, there's no question he's good. But I see, to me, it was like he was collecting a paycheck, and I'm thinking like, okay, but I'll suck up anything. I'm not going to not take this class. And the guy's name was Steve Chen Lee. And, after, I don't know, could have been a couple months of learning, but he corners me in the locker room. Goes, "Do you want to learn how to fight?" And I'm like, well, what do you think I'm taking Hungar for?
Yeah.
And he goes, "Stop me." And he comes in at me, and he starts hitting me, trapping me, and smacking me around. And he beat the snot out of me. I said, "What's that?" And he goes, "I'm not going to tell you. You have to pay for regular class here, and you got to bring me in a couple times a week at your own expense. We'll meet and you'll pay me to teach you. So I'm like,
Ah,
okay, you win. That's really cool. Goes, you can't tell anyone in class. And I'm like, okay.
yeah.
So he beats me up a lot. We do this for a few months, and he goes, you need a training partner. So I remember the kid's name, Bob Terenzio. I can sort of picture his house because he lived
What's the
closer to
last
the
name?
school. Terenzio.
Wow. I was born in Stamford, 65. My mother's maiden name is Terenzio,
You're
and there's a
kidding.
ton of them in Stamford.
Well, then you know, because that's where the school actually opened, the Jerome Mackey
Wow.
School.
Wow,
So I used
wow,
to come
wow.
from Fairfield over to Stamford.
Yeah.
And so I grabbed Bob in the locker room and I said, would you like to learn how to fight? And he looks at me and goes, well, because he's second in class with me. I'm like, half a step ahead of him. And he's like, what do you think? Well, I'm learning why we're taking Hungar. And I proceed to beat the snot out of him, tie him up and do it. He goes, what's that? I went, I don't know. But
Yeah.
Steve says I need a training partner to train with me, and we have to pay Steve extra to learn this. And he goes, that's so freaking cool. So Steve's now collecting full pay from me, full pay from Bob, as well as his pay for teaching Hungar. And now we're meeting 3 and 4 times a week. And we decide we'll meet at Bob's house and use his basement because nobody's home during the day and we can do whatever we want. So
Mm.
we're there smacking away. And Steve would take us into Chinatown. We'd meet. That's how I got to know about dim sum way back then. Because we go to Steve's house early in the morning, take the Grand Central train in. Um, because he was at the Tiger Crane School in Chinatown, the old Tiger Crane School, they let this little white boy in because I was with Steve, and everyone ignored me except for Steve. I had no idea what they're saying. Nobody spoke English.
Mm.
Nobody cared if I understood, and I could at least hold my own with whatever he was doing. No, I couldn't tell what people were talking to me about. And I saw the old kung fu movies before all the other white boys in the world because there were no subtitles. And you'd go, and that's why I got dim sum to get back to that. We go to his grandma's house, and she'd hand us a bag of hot donuts, and I'd never had a hot donut. I'm thinking, what the hell is a hot donut? I went, but I'll try it. And we're sitting in the movies. Everybody brings their own food. We're in this rinky, really old style movie theater that if it wasn't showing kung fu movies in Chinatown, I'm sure they would have torn it down. It has no other use.
Yeah.
So it's got, the classic balconies and the whole bit. And you get
Oh,
in
okay.
and the movie starts and I go to stuff this thing in my mouth and it's not a hot jelly donut because that's what I thought I was going to. It's filled with, barbecue pork. The other one had like scrambled eggs and ham. And I'm like, what is this? And Steve goes, dim sum. Haven't you ever had dim sum? And I'm like, so, I have all different, his grandma's stuff with all different kinds of dim sum. So we'd each get a couple of each one. And the movie came on. Now, the movies then, they, the main characters come out and there's like a blue screen behind them, nothing else. And they do the, typical, the main form of whatever their art is.
Yeah.
And I so love that because here's these people, you got to wait for everybody to do their form. Then the credits for the movie starts. And I'm like, that's so cool. And when I finally, as years went on, when I see like Kung Fu Theater or seen the for American audiences, they cut all that out and they have subtitles, or they've dubbed, voices
Yeah,
in
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and all the stuff. Because at the end of the movie, you would actually watch a battle between the hero and the bad guy doing whatever was a choreographed two-person form. And I
Mm.
was like, this is great. So I finally go to see, I'm doing this thing for a bunch of years. I went from being the beat up kid in school to I used whatever this art I was learning, just said it had to be part of Hungar. And people start talking about Wing Chun. And Bob and I both look and go, we're watching Enter the Dragon, and where most people go, oh, I'd like to
There
start
you
martial
go.
arts. We look up and Bob goes, hey, we do that. And we watch
Yeah.
some of the Wing Chun entries and stuff, and we're like, hey, we do finally go, what are we learning? And he goes, Wing Chun. So we were learning, basic, I don't know what version of Hong Kong Wing Chun, but Wing
Yeah.
Chun became the core. And when I do my version of stuff, my modular, my entries, whatever I do, people go, what? Wing Chun is stuck with me for many,
Yeah.
many years. People go, and I studied with different people at different seminars. I've studied with William Chung, and when he came over, because he used to come over for 5-day seminars.
Mm.
And, he'd go from like Boston to New York, to Florida to California. And I'd usually catch the Boston one and the New York one. And, so I get 10 straight days with him of training. And he invited me to come move to Australia back then. My biggest thing was I was divorced and had a child. My wife back then was not going to let me, because I had custody, take
Yeah.
Rachel to Australia. She said, I'll never see her again.
Mm.
So I regret that I didn't go to Australia, but of course my life would have been very different if I'd gone to Australia and become only Wing Chun, traditional Wing Chun.
Mm.
But anyways, he was teaching a class and everyone was upset because he was going to teach Barchando, 8-chop butterfly swords or knives. And I watch him and I was all excited. And, I watch him do something, and like he was doing some basic stuff, and up close, he was palm up. He'd check people down and palm up. And I watch him correcting people and turning their palm. And then when he did it with them playing, I always wish when he's up close, he came up palm up. And so I started doing that. He came over to correct me, and I just looked at him. And as soon as he said, do it, with my partner, I mean, still palm, he goes, well, I just corrected you. Why are you doing that? And I said, well, it's not what you do. Patted me ahead, and after that day, invited me back up to the hotel room and said, you're actually paying attention. And he started teaching me, and I fell in love, and he showed me how swords work. And they were not these big cleavers that everyone uses. They
Mm.
looked like fighting buoys. They looked like bolos. And I went, oh. And so I started doing anything I could because he encouraged me. Now, you also have to remember, I think I've told some people, and they know, since I was 4 years old, my father, my grandfather, they always carried knives. So I carried a knife with me since I was 4. And they taught me because they didn't have locks. You have to
Mm.
cut straight in or the blade folds. And of course, a slip joint, you get nasty cuts all the time because
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the blade folds on you. I didn't say that. My grandfather, both of them told me, keep it sharp, keep it oiled, keep it clean, and you'll give it to your grandchildren. And in my household, I'm doing all these different things, but we didn't have anything from Germany in our house. That was not
Mm.
going to happen. When Joe Kubert did Enemy Ace, which I love World War I fighting pilots, I'm so romantic about that. My dad looked and said, we will no longer talk to Joe Kubert, and you will not buy that comic, which of course I had to buy the comic, and I had to see Enemy Ace. My dad would,
Okay.
we didn't have anything. No, you didn't talk about Mercedes. You didn't talk about Porsche. And of course, when I got to car age, we were all building VWs and Porsches, the old 356s.
Mm.
And my dad, but anyways, I'm out with my grandfather while he's doing his rounds. And one of the pawn shops on his property, I walk in and there's this black flat knife with a lock. Guy shows it to me,
Ah.
and my grandfather sent me out with a wise guy while he goes and does his business and stuff. And the guy doesn't want to get in trouble on grandfather, so he doesn't want to not buy it for me. And he also doesn't want to buy it for me. The pawn shop owner goes, your grandfather will kill us. It's a German SS knife. And I went, I don't care.
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
get you both in trouble for not paying attention and tell them you encouraged me to get it, knowing it was German. And if you just let me buy it, and it was like, I don't know, $5-10 back then. We're not talking but it was my prized possession. I still have it. I've had a couple more. And the most amazing thing was it had a lock.
Mm.
So with everything, most martial arts, now I got to go back to it. Most of them tell you weapons work is separate from empty hand. Most traditional arts are learn the empty hand, and when you're good enough, we'll teach you weapons motions, and
Yeah, right. You get a certain belt level or something.
weapons motions have nothing in common
Mm.
with what you did with empty hands. Because I did sword work, I'm playing medieval. I'm actually cutting swords and shields and helmets down in the basement. My friends hated me because I used to make them have to wear this while we played and we practiced. And I always would go to like I said, the Metropolitan Museum and study arms and armor. My parents go through all the rest of the museum and leave me there with the guard looking at all the armor. I have ancient books on armor. I always have. I love HEMA, historical European martial art. So all of that's in my background. And obviously on the street, I fought empty-handed in the style of basic Wing Chun. And, years later when William Chung introduced me to blades, I went, because I took to that.
Mm.
I went, a system that I could pick up. And if I roll forward, I had moved and I studied under Che Ree in Connecticut. Remember, Che Ree was up in Milford, and Che Ree was Jun Ree's cousin. So I had started Jun Ree karate,
Remember him in Connecticut,
Korean karate,
Jewelry? Yeah.
and it wasn't like go down to Washington D.C. when right around the corner of Milford, which is just one town over from Fairfield, Che Ree had Jun Ree's had a open place, and I liked it, but it just didn't stir my soul.
Mm.
But I moved to Minnesota in 73, 74, right around as the year was changing. I was going to go back to school and go to Minneapolis College of Art and Design because I had left college and run off to done some stuff. Was in 73 for the Yom Kippur War in Israel. I'm going to bring my grandpa home. And I'd been a couple tours of Europe, and I decided I should go back to school. But anyways, while I was there, I suffered a very serious injury. And to recuperate, they all said you weren't, they had written me off. I remember in the emergency room, I could hear them saying he's dead, and I could hear myself inside my head going, I'm not dead. And they're flopping my body around the emergency room,
Yeah.
flopping my wife's body around, going, they're dead. And it was severe carbon monoxide poisoning. And I'm like,
Oof.
and I'm thinking, I'm not dead. And when they went to get an arterial blood, it hurt so much. I popped up and wiggled and went, oh my God, it's responding. I wasn't tapering off. And I was too
Mm.
stupid to know that I was supposed to be dying. So I actually responded. Melanie was hurt less than I was. And after a few days, I signed myself out of the hospital because I had signed myself in. I signed out against doctor's orders. Basically, they cleaned my hard drive. Like talking to you, there'd be 6 deans there. I can't tell who I'm talking to. Picking up
Okay.
like a can of soup is too heavy. When I
Mm.
first started talking, I could hear myself, hey, Dean. What came out of my mouth was, like you had a stroke. That's the closest thing is you've had a
Yeah.
stroke. And it was funny because I decided that the only way to save myself was to take martial arts. It took me a long time to get that through to 2 very
Mm.
young, famous people making the way, Gordon Franks and Pat Worley, who I am blessed. God blessed me that they went, we'll let you come here. And they testified in court for me when we finally got the court going. We just thought he was really handicapped and burned out, and we felt so bad for him and his wife. I used to clean the school. I'd get there in the morning, open it up, clean the bathrooms, clean the floors. I couldn't afford to pay for anything. I couldn't function. And when the school closed, I cleaned the floors and cleaned the bathrooms, made sure it's ready for the next morning, and I repeat it. Through them and them letting me train every day, all day, and do nothing else but train. And I also joined the Nautilus Club. Became a Nautilus instructor. I tried to rebuild myself through martial arts.
Mm.
Melanie, my wife, had no idea, so she just did whatever I told her to do. She had been one of my original students in Connecticut, so it wasn't like I was starting her on scratch, going just do martial arts. I started her in it because I had taught her basic martial arts and beat on her. Through them, they had a friend come out from Washington, Clarence Murray. Clarence Murray is known as the Psy Man. He was part of that whole Jun Ree and related groups in Washington, always fought together, were in the tournaments together. They were the mainstays traveling around. Of course, they became the mainstays they're the ones who formed the PKA. They're the ones who helped form the karate circuit with Joe Corley and everything that became the
Oh,
big
okay. Okay.
competitor circuit. So I'm blessed being with all of them. I'm part of it. And of course, I drove them nuts because I always wanted to do weapons. I tried to tell them about Michael Echanis because I was really big into Soldier of Fortune because, and they're like, that's not what we do. This is sport
Yeah.
karate. And I'd go, that's not self-defense. And of course, I did all sorts of weapons. They left me in corner. This goes back to Clarence Murray. Clarence is part of their family. He's got to go work for the old Control Data because he does military security work. And so they offered him the use of the school. So Clarence comes out and in his account starts doing stuff with the sword, and he's making sounds. He's his own sound machine as he's doing stuff, just like he had a soundtrack in a movie. And of course, I'm enamored with him. And I take
Mm.
the guy who's living with me, Tim Olson. We fall in love with him, and it was a perfect solution for what Junri Karate, who's in Mid America Karate. How do we keep Clarence Murray from affecting the whole sport karate group?
Oh, okay.
And how
Yep.
do we keep Bram under control? So they go, while you're here, Bram and Tim are your private students, which kept me from the main crowd. And Clarence just kept feeding me information, and he started teaching me size. By the time he left, he gifted me my very first set of size. And he would teach me his fighting techniques of moving in, because everybody back then did all sorts of fancy spinning kicks and double kicks, tornado kicks, axe kicks, because it's part of what looks good in sport karate. And, Mid-America Karate and those guys, that's John Longstreet and all those guys, Terry Norblum, as well as, John and Pat, John Worley, Pat Worley, Larry Carnahan, Gordon Franks. They were talking serious sport karate here. Pat Rufus, all those guys are all their buddies, and they're the center of all of that. And I'm on the periphery because I work in the office with them by that point, and I'm learning from Clarence. So Clarence taught me a great deal. And as people are spinning, he goes, the next time, because I was scared, you step back and you end up walking back into a kick, and he goes, as soon as there's that little hip turns, you step in, put your chest on their back, and punch them in the back of the head and drop them. First guy spun on me when I got almost my chest on his back, and I punched him in the back of the head, and he dropped. And they went, oh, point. And I went, I didn't get hit. Boy, that's cool. And I used to practice all the time on weapons. And I didn't see Clarence for a lot of years because eventually we had the lawsuit happen and we moved. But now, Mid-America Karate, remember I said they do all the sports stuff and the super fights and the Diamond Nationals?
Right.
Well, during the Diamond Nationals at the big fights, at the super fights, they'd always have demos in between the fights, between the point fighting championships and the full contact matches. And they'd have entertainment. So there's this really tall, skinny kid up there, and he's got a troupe with him with Brenda Davis and John Chung and some others, and it's Jimmy Takosa. And what are they doing in front of everyone? They're doing Sinawali. They're doing Serrata done for show. And Jimmy had done the halftime show for one of the Super Bowls. So here's this young kid who's direct from Angel Caballas, who's, got ego up to here, and he's really good. The next thing I know, Ernie Reyes Jr. was my daughter's age. They were and Matt, the Claps, who started Century with Gary Hestelow, because they're all from Mid-America Karate. They had moved out. They started the whole thing. Their son Matt was born, and Rachel was, and I got to meet this young kid a few years older than Rachel, not by much, because he's a little tiny kid who was all this energy, Ernie Reyes Jr. So obviously Ernie Reyes Jr. is going to have a great career as a fighter or whatever, and his dad is amazing. But his dad, when they get out to do the demos, and the Reyes demo team, what do? Do they do fighting techniques? No. Do they do karate techniques or taekwondo techniques? No. They're in uniform, and they're doing synchronized Sinawali drills. And they give credit to this guy, Remy Presas.
So this is the beginning.
Okay. So now this is building up, and then here's one of these tough-ass fighters who I respect. Young guy, great kicks, giant afro, so bold he's got a Superman logo on his shirt, Super Dan Anderson. And he and Fred King, and there's off time, are talking about the same guy, Remy Presas, and that when trained, he knows no fear. And I watch them when they're not doing stuff, they're playing with sticks. And this stuck with me, and it went, Dan Anderson. And Dan and I joke about it's his fault to do modern it is, that he kept talking about Remy Presas. And I watched, like I said, the demos, and in the middle of the karate stuff they're doing, because they did let them do demos, I'm sure, because it was so different. Right. They're doing Sinawali drills. And when I finally find Remy in 1980, Remy, when I watch him fight and see some of the step-by-steps of him, I looked right at my wife back then and said, that's what I want to do. I want to fight like him. Because it looked like Wing Chun mixed with Chinese arts with weapons.
With sticks, yeah.
And because of things I did, I had to stay off. I stayed off on the side because I was a young, crazy yippie outlaw back then. It took me till retiring from all that before I actually came in public with Remy. And
so this is 1980?
Yeah.
So 1980, you officially meet him. Is that?
I started doing modern in 1980. Um,
And where did you meet him?
outside of New York, because
So
Doug and
at a
Pierre both guys
seminar?
were there. Yeah, and I heard about him before that because because of Dan and those guys, and he's been in black belt,
Mm.
but it's Dan's fault. And then it was at
So
one of the times
we'll
that
blame
with Richard, I
Dan's
tell
schedule to
people,
come on here at some point too.
yeah, um, and and I always joke that it's Dan's fault, and Dan and I become very close. And after I've been doing Modern East for a bunch of years, Remy used to be a vagabond, go from place to place. When I moved to Florida, he loved Florida.
Mm.
He'd come stay with me, go right on the beach. Um,
Yeah.
he liked going down to the clubs down on South Beach, and like in my room, he'd knock on the door, and it's like 2 in the morning. Oh, Bram, are you awake? Oh, I'm awake now, sir. Oh, we should go down by
Yeah.
the pool. So we go down by the pool and we train. Or, at all different odd times. And if he had guests coming to visit him, I would move him to one of my friends' small hotels on the beach where he could be private. And he always needed ones that opened on the beach, the really, really old motel hotels with a kitchen and
Okay.
that and everything, which, we put him up and he could have his own food place across the street. And someone once joked about, the way Remy'd come in because I would get that call. Oh, Bram, I'm coming to the airport. I see you. Now, there's a lot of airports around Fort Lauderdale, Miami, that whole area. Never tell me. And I used to call a friend in the airline. They go, this is illegal. I said, you got to tell me what airport he's coming into. Just run his name.
What
We're
airport is
not
coming
allowed to
in?
do that. No, you got to do that. So back then, you could walk right up to the gate. So he'd come strolling off
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
plane, and I'd be waiting there. Go, Bram, you found me. And I'm like, yes, sir. So, Bram, you
Yeah.
go get my bags. And then I'd go get his bags, and I'd take him to the house. Like I said, if he needed to meet someone, I would get him the hotel room. And sometimes I remember John Ralston brought him to this big resort away from the whole beach area. And he thought he'd like it.
Mm.
And I dropped him off there. I'm only home for a day. Remy's on the phone going, Bram, you come get me. I go, come get you. You're at a beautiful resort. He goes, Bram, you come here. So I drive and pick him up because he wants to go back to the beach and he wants to go back to my house. And there's times the joke, it was in there's a book about Remy that Dieter Noodle had done, and Brian wrote something. We all got to write something by what years we got to meet Remy and do little
Oh, okay.
stories. I said put a cute story in there. One of the stories was Remy would call out of nowhere, and I would just have to figure out what airport he was at. He called me all the time. Oh, Bram, I'm coming, or I'm at the airport, and I'd go get him.
Oh, and you got to figure
But
out.
he
Okay.
would come at
Okay.
the house and go, "Oh, we should go see. We're gonna drive over and we'll go see Bo Sayak." And Bo was over in Naples, about a 2 hour drive.
Naples.
So we're
Yeah.
driving across Alligator Alley, which is absolutely nothing. We're driving across the Everglades. There's nothing. And of course, he'd invariably fall asleep. And he'd look at me and go, Bram, we see Bo and we should go home. I'm like, oh my God. So we'd see Bo, they'd talk, I'd listen and do whatever. And then we turn around and drive home. Um, that's how I got to meet some of the guys who did different Ornese things because he'd go, I need to go talk to this instructor. Be
Mm.
like, okay. And that's how I got to meet Professor V and Phil Shanique because he goes, oh, I need to see V. I said, you need to see V. I went, okay. And Tim Olson, my friend from Minnesota, was down in Florida staying with me. So we load ourselves up on the car and we drive down South Miami, down to Hialeah. And it's the first time I get to meet Phil Shanique. And Phil Shanique sits there, I sit there, and Tim sits there while Remy has this talk with Professor V.
Yeah.
And they have someone interviewing them for a magazine where Professor V is going, my Arnese is from Remy and my strikes are from Remy, and I use modern Arnese as part of our whole thing. And I'm like, really? And Phil and I
Mm.
have stayed friends for many, many years. And that's how, like I said, I got to meet Professor V. I got to meet people because Remy would go, I need you to go bring a letter to someone. So the Canientes were going to be down in Florida from up around New York and coming down from California, doing a week-long camp. and Remy gives me a letter. So I drive to 3 hours north to the camp, present the letter to to Junie Caniente. He goes, "Oh yeah, Remy said he was going to send you with a letter." I get to meet Kukoi. I get to meet Don
Yeah.
Cuesta, who was their guy from up in New Jersey, who is now
Don Cuesta.
helping them run
Yeah.
the whole
Yeah.
thing. So I spend a week at the camp with them, and I tried my best to learn Dos Pares, not do modern arnis when I'm doing it. But it was that kind of thing. And when I first moved here, um, as I'm doing it, and I opened my hydroponic store down here, one of the first people I met was Dwight Woods. His school, his JKD school, was around the corner from my
Yeah.
store. And
In
my store was a good
Miami.
hour and a half from my home. So I used to
Yeah.
go see Dwight.
Yeah.
And Dwight said, "Oh, you should come to my seminars," when he would bring Guru Dan in 1 or 2 times a year,
Correct.
where they would do obviously the JKD curriculum. And back then,
Yeah.
if you're not part of the JKD group, you're not training with Guru Dan. You're not getting in.
No. No. No.
They're not
No. No.
advertising, they're not telling you, and they have their own little clique. And because of Dwight, I get in. And that's actually a couple of Dwight's students. Santi used to work for Lassie Zabo. Lassie was one of the students and best friends with Dwight. And Santi was the little guy helping Lassie make the squeeze balls you could buy back then, because Lassie did that on the side. Anyway, so everybody I met was tied to everybody else.
Yeah.
And Remy, of course, gave me a letter saying, "Go bring this to Dan." So I waited. Of course, all that one's around. Everyone's talking to Dan. And I'm on the back. Nobody knows me. I can't get to him. He looks and goes,
Yeah.
"You're so polite and quiet. What's your name?" I said, "Bram. I have a letter from Remy." He goes, "Oh." And he had just started going out with Paula back then. So he goes, "Paula, Remy sent Bram to us." And I actually became side friends because I'm obviously not a full JKD person. And Guru Dan, I've ever trained with him, he'll go, "I'm going to do something at half speed." Well, it looks like light speed. I can't see when he calls half speed, I can't even follow it. And I'm looking like, and
Yeah. I hear it's
I could have
overwhelming
Paula
doing
go,
one of the
"Could you show
seminars.
me?" And Paula would show me, and everybody in the whole JKD group. I know people say, "Oh, well, they have attitude." Everyone treated me really nicely, and they tried to bring me in to catch up to speed. And because I had a Wing Chun Hungar background, there's
Yeah.
lots of stuff I picked up pretty quickly. It's been
Sure.
other stuff I related to modern arnis. So modern arts became my main art. And there's a group of us, and people have a bad image of modern arnis because Remy taught in seminars. So, and the Kempo people brought him in first because he kept going, "Make this the art within your art." And he teach some Sinawali drills, either single Sinawali or double Sinawali. That's what they learn on a weekend. He'd tell you, "Go back, here's their certificate, teach." And people went, "Well, that's so strange." No, it wasn't. He was infecting people with modern arnis. And if
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
an
No, there was
instructor,
definitely an
you got a
objective.
guy telling you, "Go back and teach in your school rather than take years. Teach this, make it part of your stuff." A lot of people, especially in California, only knew like double Sinawali and simple single Sinawali, bang, 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 how to enter a little. And they thought it was the coolest thing in the world. So
Yeah.
now you got to roll forward. We're doing a big seminar, a big martial art camp, and Graciela's there. And obviously, Graciela is one of the few women ever under Angel Cabales and Teddy Lukai. She's part of the original like JKD group with Guru Dan, under Guru Dan, and she's obviously pound for pound stronger than most men I know. She may be one of the toughest, as well as being beautiful. And I knew her before a lot of people did because she had gone out with Tony Lopez, part of the whole PKA thing, and the WKA. And Tony was one of the main opponents for Gordon Franks. And I always thought she was beautiful. And so and we joke about some of the different odd magazines where people do weird things, and I've had difference. But anyway, so I had a relation, and I asked her to come teach. So I had Ernie Boggs teaching, I had her teaching, uh, uh, just drew a blank. It doesn't matter, but she got it. It's about the modernists. She comes out. I teach for a bit. She comes up to me and goes, "What's that?" I said, "Modern arnis." She goes, "No, no, quit joking. What are you teaching?" I said, "Modern arnis." She goes, "I'm from California. I've seen modern arnis. They do like a single Sinawali thing, a double." Because what the hell is all this? That looks like real, Eskrima stuff. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's modern arnis. So she'd never seen a whole system of modern arnis. She had only seen
Mm.
what most people knew of what he demonstrated at Odd
When he
Keys.
came into the camp
You
schools,
know, and of
right?
course I always harassed him, and we didn't have training knives. They'd have give us a shortened dowel. So I'd sit there, and on the first seminar I ever got a dowel, I cut it down to a blade with a handle. And Remy goes, "What's
Yeah,
that?" And I said, "Well, it's more like a knife. Now it's got an edge. I can tell where I'm going." And because I
yeah,
always carried knives, and I told him I love knives and swords, I took him seriously. Because you got to remember, my heart is trying to find someone who will teach me how to be a knight in shining armor. I want to use
yeah.
swords. I want to cut heads off. I want to cut arms off. I want to do what samurai do. I want to do what Farang warriors do. I want to be, an old-fashioned knight. I would have been happy to be a musketeer. I would have been happy to be a conquistador. I would have been happy to be a
Yeah.
knight of the Round Table. I collected the old elastilin figures, the historical figures of arms and armor. My room was filled with books about arms and armor. I told you the whole thing. So here's this man. He goes, "Oh, you need to know where the sharp is. If I can touch you, you're cut already." And he kept talking about cutting again. And Dan Anderson, many years later, said he thought Remy meant the cutting motion of the arc of the stick, not that he was cutting someone.
Mm.
And Remy occasionally would say that he'd be in the Sipa hut with Cristino when he was young, and he'd watch his grandfather and father and uncle teaching the Bolo battalion. And he talked about Bolo. So I
Okay.
started harassing Remy, going, "I want to know, I want to know." And
So,
over
just
the,
my question is,
yeah,
and this is kind of a question from a viewer. So, generally speaking, the majority of the schools in America, again, in that time frame, were getting obviously stick, and it sounds like elements of stick. So it was unusual that he would give edge weapon material. Is
oh
that
yeah, he
fair?
didn't teach it. Guru Dan didn't either. If you read Guru Dan's early books, when he gets the knife, he goes, "We're not supposed to teach this. I don't teach these. This is
Oh, yeah.
forbidden."
Okay. Okay.
I got to go all the way back to when Michael Echanis was out, because most people had no idea who Michael Echanis was back then, and because of who I'm a big Soldier of Fortune guy from the old days when it first came out. Michael appealed directly to what I did. Black Belt did one little article on him back in the 70s, and people flipped out, and they talked about, because they were going to do a series of books with Michael,
Mm,
and they had a knife defense, and they said the book about how to use it, the black covered book, the outlaw, you couldn't get. It was only through in the front of the books always talked about all the different military groups he worked with and was advisor with, and the advisors, and you couldn't do it. So I had Pat Worley and other people I know, right, because they obviously know the people at O'Hara Press, because we're talking about they're the
mm,
founders of the PKA, and they're the big sport karate people and part of the whole June Ree family. And Pat and other people knew people in the military. And I beseeched O'Hara Press, let me have a copy of this alleged, outlawed book that you can't sell to the public. And when it's America,
right.
and of course, I knew of Paladin Press. I knew of Dover Press and other things that sold, books about cannabis and all sorts of stuff you're not supposed to know about, and Ginberg stuff. And I turned around and went, "I want this book." And it took forever and all sorts of letters back and forth. And when the book came, I was amazed. And so I started practicing stuff out of his stuff, going, "Oh, it's blade stuff," because that's all I cared about. So now you roll back to me being with Remy. I said, "I want to learn Bolo."
Also,
Well,
you
he
actually
said,
made a
we'll
point
get this.
to.
I don't really teach knife. And I went, and Remy would have people come to his camps, and he'd go, and I'd have already paid for the camp. He goes, "This is my guest." And I went, "Okay. He's going to go teach you some of his knife. You go with him." But I paid for the seminar, do your modern East. He goes, "Bram, I'm going." That's why I thought meet Shashir. He looks at me and goes, "Bram, you go with Sheer." And Sheer started teaching me Bally Song and teaching me his version of knife, because Remy had sort of adopted him as his son, and he was
Okay.
back then became
Okay.
the vice president of International Modern East Philippines, because Remy always helped other Filipinos, and especially if they did martial arts, took them in, and hopefully they'd become full
Mm,
modern East. And they all knew of Remy from the Philippines. So
okay.
um, Garcia and there's a whole bunch of people, Remy would just go learn knife with them. see how they use knife. And I would miss out on most people would go, where have you been? And I had no idea what they're doing at the Arnis camp.
Yeah.
I'd look at it and some of the stuff because my brain can only comprehend so much. So I knew what I was going to stick with. And the more I heard, so Remy one point pulled me aside and said, I'll give you a choice. You can do stick or you can do bolo. If
Mm.
you do knife, you can teach military and police, which is very bad. Uh, they don't respect it. It's hard to do. Or you can teach the general public. And it was like one of those, I had to sit back and go, are you trying to discourage me and tell me not to? You want me to say, okay, you're right, that's too hard? Or you want me to go, that's what your family did. I realize you had a hard time. That's what I want to do. And I kept them went, this is not a hard question. I said, I want to learn blade. I want to learn
Yeah. Yeah.
bolo. He goes, you can't do one and do the other. So what do you mean? He goes, because you'll be cutter ready. And he used to tell me that the beauty of the art, and I agree, there's nothing more beautiful than stick. I don't care whose stick you do, what style stick is beautiful. You can hit with it, trap with it, lock with it, throw with it. It's truly amazing. And you can switch hands as you're going. None of that works with a blade. You put your hand
Mm.
where a blade is, and your fingers become fingies, R and S, fall on the floor. You put your arm
Yeah.
up there, you go to check it or all the different, I don't learn different disarms. He goes, here's the basic disarms and here's what you'll do for blade. And he would still, when he's teaching, go, remember, you got to know where the sharp is. And I don't think anybody else had paid attention. Kelly did. I'm sure, Hawk paid attention, a few others, but most people just went, yeah, he's trying to tell you. And the myth of, where your knuckles are with the edges and people, all the Sinawali drills, that's how you ruin your blade. If you ever watch
Yeah.
Remy do a demo like with Roland Dante's, like the big one at Madison Square Garden, there's sparks fun. They get the lights off. The machetes are hitting their sparks. You know what they do with the
Yeah.
blades after? They
They
throw
just
them
throw them
away
away.
because they've ruined
No, I
them.
know. I've done it with machetes. They're
Yeah,
done
and it
after that.
ruins the
They're done.
blade. And people said, what are you doing? I said, you understand
Yeah.
that when people made swords before mass production, before
Mm.
World War II, when us giving them mass produced machetes that you could just use for work and kill,
Yeah.
it could take a year or 2 years to make a sword. It could take all the rice that a village could earn to make one
Mm.
sword. And the art of being a knight was learning how to use a blade properly. Just because it works in combat does not mean you understand the proper use of a sword, because you have to learn to protect your edge. Your edge is really hard. You block with the
Yeah.
flat, you cut with the edge.
Yeah.
That's why Palace was such a big thing when he said, oh, my grandfather and uncle taught me Palace, the passing, going with the force, because you do a lot of
Mm.
that with a blade. You pass with it to then come back in.
And
You
come
don't
back
meet,
in. Yeah.
because he used to tell me we have force the force, we have meet the force, and we have go with the force. Well, meet the force, sometimes in some of his books or his tapes, you see him, he smacks right on the guy's hand. Goes, oh, that's what you would do for real. But we do stick to stick to
Mm.
protect ourselves. Well, you don't do stick to stick ever in practice learning blade. You lightly tap the guy's hand or you're on the flat. And people go, oh, you're stupid. And I went, you've obviously, and because now my whole life I've spent around people who make swords, make knives. I study swords.
Mm.
You know where most of the swords come from in museums? From the battlefields that they found, or museum, people that have gifted stuff. There's no
Gifted them.
way
Yeah.
to get
Yeah.
them. A lot of stuff in the museums, they come with the matching hand because that's how they got the sword. The guy's hand
Yeah.
got cut off in the Middle Ages. And they go, you
Yeah.
understand, fighting swords, guards were there for a reason. They got more and more complicated because the first target is the
The
hands.
hand. Right.
Even in Japanese arts, you see in the movies, people are banging blade to blade, doing whatever.
I know, but it was they were hunting. They were hand
But
hunting.
they in that idea of a low guard, the guy
Mm.
swings his sword and you come up with like an uppercut stepping back. You know what? The guy's arms continue with stumps and his hands and his sword fall and you win.
Yeah. No, the motion's going to continue. Yeah.
Yeah. No hands, you win. And I took that seriously, the whole thing of defanging the snake, because,
Mm.
and thank God I have lots of old copies of manuals and I've worked with museum directors. Because of my dad, I got to meet them and I felt free about approaching them. It's like what I had showed you, some of the pictures, like from Benny Hassin.
Yeah.
Um,
Incredible.
if you're not a professor or a doctor, there's some books you may not go see. Like I wanted to see books on werewolves, and I went to the University of Pennsylvania library. My dad had gone to school there. I had been going doing courses there, and I wanted to see the books they had on file because they got a great werewolf collection. They said, "Are you a doctoral candidate?" I'm like, no. Do you have a doctorate? No. Are you a professor here? No. Well, we can't let you see the books. And I said, what do you mean? Well, it's knowledge. How can you deny knowledge? You're a library. I said, has anybody signed them out since you've had them here? And they go, not since like the 1800s.
Wow.
I'm like, so wouldn't it be good if someone can see them? They go, well, they're in German and other language. I said, but don't they have nice woodcuts, pictures of werewolves and stuff? Yes. Can I see them? No. How about you put them on the table, I'll have gloves, and you change? No. And I used to go nuts. So when they tell me stuff about that, and I told you my dad had lots of access to lots of the old Egyptian stuff and Asian stuff. I think I took a picture for you of the National Geographic 1941, where they actually had the walls, a copy of the Beni
Oh,
Hassan wall, one part of it. And that's
incredible.
actually codified jujitsu. This goes back to some of the discussions you've had on your
I
place
know.
about
There was clinch,
where does Arnis
takedowns.
really come from? You know, and arguing about, and I go, look, people may have fought before the Spanish got there. They obviously had wars, but what we call Arnis doesn't exist till after we learn Arnis as taught the Spanish taught to the Filipinos, and they're doing conquistador Spanish fighting and Portuguese fighting, and the Filipinos don't move or step anything like any other Asian art. We step just like we're doing historical European martial arts. We got some kung fu stuff thrown in because China has an influence,
Just China.
but none of the
Yeah.
cutting moves, none of our angles, nothing we do. There was no such thing as Arnis before the Spanish got there. And it's like karate. Most people think karate is thousands of years old. You know, it wasn't officially karate till the 1900s. And
Yeah.
karate do doesn't come till after World War II, where we banned the jujitsu, the bujitsu part of it, and said, you cannot do it for war. You have to do it for inner development. People go, it couldn't
Mm.
be that young. I go, yes, it is. You know, you can't change it. Well, I guess you can try to change history as you're doing now, get rid of statues, do whatever. But anyways, so all of this, what I sent you from the magazine, I saw from the old, before World War II or the start of World War II
Mm.
in National Geographic. I always wanted to see the walls. The terrorists had taken over the area, so when I took a group of people to go there, we couldn't actually go see the walls. When I went to the British Museum, I showed you the pictures that I dealt with the
Yeah,
head
you
of
have. Yeah.
antiquities who said, you don't, the opposite. They went, as far as we're concerned, your degree in martial arts make up for having a doctorate. No one's asked to see these walls. And the drawings that are there, thank God for Napoleon. The best drawings we have, almost exact copies, are Napoleon's art people, his archaeologists who document because he was so in love with it. They uncovered stuff. So the walls of Beni Hassan, those pictures aren't just a wall. They also have the
Mm.
ones from Napoleon's people. And basically going, and this is how it relates back to Filipino martial arts and what existed before or after. Obviously, people fought wars before ancient Egyptians.
Yeah.
The Assyrians, the Babylon, you name it, people had wars. The Egyptians, no matter what anyone wants to say, who are the red men of their time, um, they codified it. They are the first professional army. How do we know? They carved it in stone.
Oh my
How do we
God.
know they knew
Like you showed me.
jujitsu techniques, joint locking,
Yeah.
throwing? They've got it carved in stone. It's
On the
over
wall. Yeah.
5,000 years old. Nobody went back in Throwback Thursday and all of a
No,
sudden carved it in the
overnight and
wall. It's there.
start. Yeah.
Now, you know what? And the reason someone in the early 30s and 40s, they said obviously they didn't like black people, which is not true. My family coming from artists, I knew exactly why things are two different colors. The only way you can see one figure superimposed on
The
another is
contrast.
they got to be two
See the
different colors.
contrast.
And in
Yeah.
their actual pictures of people from the Far East, people from Nubia, Ethiopia, themselves, the Greeks, everybody was the color that we tend to be.
Mm.
Fleshy pink, red men, or reddish to brown. The Chinese and the Oriental people. Granted, I'm dating myself to say Oriental and Asians rather than the whatever. And I mean no disrespect that they made them yellow. The Nubians were different colors of black, and Ethiopians were different colors of black. The Egyptians weren't stupid. But anyways, here's this stuff carved in stone and nothing to do with race relations. When they did it on the wall with white and red, so you could see who was grabbing what
Oh,
where.
no,
Otherwise, if
right,
everyone's the same
we
color,
can,
you can't
yeah,
see it. But
absolutely.
there's modern jujitsu 5,000 years ago. And below it,
Yeah,
what I was trying to show you was the drills we do with sticks, because they were stick fighters, and they used to actually lace their sticks into their hands. So that if you destroyed their hands, so they could continue
the stick
fighting.
didn't go flying. Yeah.
And they have some of the original sword arts. Not that they invented that stuff, but they invented the art of war, of teaching and codifying it. People go, well,
Mhm.
I don't care what myth, I don't care about what you think. Some stork fought a mantis and a system came up. That's a bunch of hooey. That's like Washington cutting the cherry tree down. You
Yeah.
know, Paul Revere didn't ride through the town going, and you're from my area going, the British are coming, because we were all Brits. We're
Yeah,
New
back then,
Englanders. We were all British. We didn't
it
say
was the
we're,
British.
might have said the Redcoats are coming because that's the British military, but nobody
Mhm.
said anyways. So a lot of for me, because I'm an old-fashioned wannabe archaeologist for dinosaurs and arms and armor, if it's not based in reality, I don't want to hear it, and that affects how I teach. So I watch Remy, and I'm sure you've seen most Filipino martial artists do not have an organized system. They teach whatever they're going to teach.
Yeah, I
And over
mean,
time, you
to
get a
it's
system.
more so now, some organization, but back in the '90s, when I was first exposed, it was random.
Yeah, and so even before we go earlier than that, it was really random. Now,
Definitely random.
if you take people and Ernesto Presas did not appreciate what Dieter did for him. Dieter Noodle, not only talented, but he's a true, and I mean this in a good sense, because I have lots of dear German friends and a German stepbrother, anal retentive about making things organized. So he gave it, and he brought that organization to his version of Remy's modern, because he left Ernesto and went to Remy. So there's a complete structure. A lot of us who
Mhm.
are first generation students of Remy, our job is to organize and translate what the man's telling us to teach others, because their
Yeah.
English is a second language and they're teaching away. So when I started putting what I called combat armies together, and Remy lived with me on and off here in Florida, back and forth, I would show him. Um, I would turn around and try to get people to understand what he was doing. And I took from different sources and said, look, these guys do it almost the same. This is what he's trying to teach us. Sometimes I need to hear it from someone else, not what he's telling us. So I came up, and as I showed him what I was coming up, and he introduced me to, Bobby Tabata when he first came over. Remy brought him to my house down in Florida. So I got to meet Bobby
Mhm.
in my living room and showing me, and we're talking, and he did groupings. And everything I've done, when I built race cars, we do modular race cars with a basic frame, and we used to swap motors and trannies in and out. And we had plates where you could stack actual, body lifting weights on and
Yeah.
off to change the weight of the car to change classification. Um, most Porsche and VW, we'd swap motors in and out. Most race cars, you swap a motor out, pop it, not like, do it in your garage, not like doing it
Yeah.
like in a repair shop. You got to be able to move these race parts in and out during a race and swap it. So
Quickly.
everything's modular. My
Yeah.
parents used to do modular growing outside. I just like the whole. My dad used to talk to me about production stuff. Comics are modular.
Mm.
You know, um, you see a set scene and they build them up. You build them up. My dad was an engineer on the side and worked for GE, and an industrial designer, as well as being, like I said, painter on the side. Illustrator, painter. So modular is part. So when I talked to Bobby, he's talking about how they're going to start doing. They do groupings, which was not the accepted way to do Balintawak back then. Balintawak was one-on-one, not a group thing. Bobby's part of that group that started doing groupings, and his groupings have become unique. And I went, I like how he thinks.
Mm.
And I'm doing stuff with Remy on my porch, and all this going through my head, and we're on my back porch training. And I think Bruce Chu talked about it. He's paying attention to other stuff. He's watching the girls on the beach. We're in the room. He's watching television. And I realized he's paying no attention to me. He's still beating the snot out of me. And if I ever scored a hit, he just took it up a notch. And I'm like, I don't get it. But in the middle of doing this, I just had one of those V8 moments, and I went, oh. And I stopped, and he goes, Bram, what are you doing? I said, do that again. And I watch him. Oh, someone said lycanthropy is fascinating. I'm a werewolf. I'm a lichen. Yes, Brian, I'm a lichen. I really am. I'm aware. I'm a moon child.
Right.
I'm year of the
Right.
water snake, the cobra, and I've always said I'm a lichen. My daughter's a vampire, but I'm a lichen. Um, so yeah. Yes, I love all the underworld stuff, and I love all werewolf movies. Um, that's just so I just happen to look over and see it. Anyways,
No, no,
so I
no, no,
watched him
no.
and I realized that he's switching drills on me. Not that he's switching hands. He's switching drills, and then he'd go back to it. So I stopped and said, "I'm watching him," and I went, "Ah." I said, "I got it." People describe flow as you're able to change fast enough to go to something else and adapt to it. And I went, ah, it's a modular unit. When there's a common element, you can move to something else. So I started practicing my students, and Dan Anderson came to stay with me. We're on the back porch and we're doing some drills. And I start upon the hit because of his force. I'm passing. I'm using umbrella and quote unquote, open umbrella, which a lot of people call slant block, and closed umbrella. Then when I enter, to pass him and move to the next section. Because what are you doing?
Mm.
I said, what Remy does to me. He goes, let me see that again, because he expected the next hit. And I just went to
Based
the
on a
next side.
pattern. Okay. Okay.
And we played, and he goes, what's that? So I started doing it. And that's when it occurred to me, because again, all the way back to my artist stuff, that I only have 5 basic colors, 5 elements. I have black, white, red, yellow, blue. That's every color in the world. I wasn't allowed to have all the pre-mixed paints. My dad made me grind my
Mm.
own pigments. And you have to grind and make your own stuff for Japanese and Chinese brush painting, but I had to mix my own paints. I'm very good at mixing color and seeing color difference. And when I run out, when I used to paint murals as a living, I ran out of paint. I just make up a whole new batch. People go, that matches exactly. Well, to me, I'd go, it's an almost. I need a couple more
Mm.
drops. And and I tell people white in pigment in paint, not in color, not in light, not in like
Mm.
um, white is what you call a tint. The more white I add, the tint. So, and when you add black, that's adding a shade. And sometimes you have to add a little bit of tint, a little bit of shade. And I tell people, for
Okay.
example, there's no such thing as green. That's where early comic books were good for me, because comic books, and they were, so cheaply done on newsprint, is dots of green, I mean blue, dots of yellow, and from a distance, it's green. But if you held it up close, looked at it with a magnifying glass, you'd see there's no green, it's just dots of blue and dots of yellow.
That's
Well,
yellow.
that was considered cheap printing. Well, that becomes pixel, and that becomes inkjet printing. And sometimes the smaller the dots and the more you can mix them, because if you look in your printer, you only have 3 colors in black,
Yeah.
because the white is the paper itself. We don't
Right.
mix white. We don't have it white as an ink. So I learned to use dyes, which are closer to inks. And my dad was a famous watercolorist on the side. So I grew up with, him and Bud Riley and Lou Cormier and Joe Surveyor and a bunch of the guys where I was the little kid in the life class. But anyways, they taught me about paint. The idea of pixels and common elements and mixing is what led to modular. And when I first did it, Remy put it in writing and said a few times, "Went, oh my God, you've supercharged our niece." I just found a way, like Prego sauce, that it's in there already. I tried to find a
Mm.
way to teach. And of course, as I gravitated towards Blade, I found a way to teach his elements using Blade. And I've been honored by his family and have certificates, which mean nothing, they're just paper, that call me the guardian of the legacy of Bolo and the guardian of Presas Bolo. And it's signed off by, Filipino government agencies, and it became my thing. And I'm blessed that when a lot of the guys like you, who I know who would teach at camp, they bring me in, and I don't compete against the stick people. I teach bolo.
Yeah.
I teach knife. And my knives reflect my whole idea of what brings up attributes. So just so people don't know about my knives, I make the only folding knives and even fixed blades that we do non-lethal, less than lethal, lethal, and can roll back down again. Because that's what I think martial arts are about, controlled force. What's our
Yeah.
focus will do. That's what guntings really are. That's why all my knives are named after Filipino. Gunting and the connotation is limb destruction and escalation in force, not just scissoring. We know it that we're scissoring on an arm or a limb of some kind. And
Mm.
but we know it's a tool in there. That goes back to Guru Dan showed a little of that in his early books and went, oh, I won't show you knife. Well, the more I learned, because I come from an artist family, I had to deal with cadavers. I have to know anatomy. As my dad said, if you don't know it, you can't draw it. So I
Mm.
had to know basic anatomy. I went on to be a PA in surgery. I've worked as a paramedic class 1 for years because my mom wanted, good Jewish kid, wants to be a doctor, anything in the medical field.
Yeah.
And of course, all I wanted to do was do martial art. She also got upset when I first was doing mechanics. Eventually, I got an offer to go to Porsche school. My mother went, no son of mine's going to have black fingers all the time. My goal was to build custom Porsches and not have black fingers, but make good money making custom Porsches. But my mother was going to have none of that. And it took years for my mother, who was a doctor. She was in her 70s before she went, oh my God, I just got it. You being a grandmaster is the same as me getting my doctorate. She goes, I can't. And my mother started training with me in her 70s and went, I'm so amazed by your knife designs about the way you organize your system.
Oh,
Because
neat.
I believe, Remy gave me the idea of it's got to be simple. You got to be able to learn it. Remy was the first one to ever go, let me put this stick in your hand, go teach. Not do this for years. After the first, you go teach. I go, what do you mean go teach? You just taught me. He goes, you'll learn fastest by teaching, because he was a professor. He really was, out of the university.
Yeah, compounds where you just learn. Yeah.
Because he
Further.
taught out of Santo Tomas and the places. So you learn fastest by teaching. You learn what you know, and you learn really quickly what you don't know. And I would run back to him, and I was one of the first ones to buy it. He goes, which one of my videos? I just did them. Which one do you want? I went, all of them. Now back then, Dean, I want you to know, I bought a VCR because they were remember, they're very expensive. You couldn't buy tapes back then. You could barely rent them at places to play. Nobody made their, only big companies did that. So I had a friend in the military, in the AV division, make me copies of Remy's tapes, and I put the originals away. I still have the originals. Make me copies that I could play all the time. And then my wife went nuts. I got my mom to chip in, my grandma, took some money I earned, and I bought this very expensive VCR back then that did frame by frame and all different grades of slow motion. And my mother goes, what do you want that for? Because I put the videos on and I'd watch them frame by frame. And Remy could tell if you didn't practice, because we only saw him at seminars. He didn't have a school. And I traveled from seminar to seminar. He would start to do something and he would blow people off. And the famous line was, oh yeah, you could do that. You could do, people get all excited and go, ooh, that's the kiss of death. If he said you could do that, yeah, you could, but that's not what he wanted you to do. You could do that, but that's like, you can do it, you may not. That's not what I was. So I go up and start asking him questions, and he knew from my questions that I had not only been practicing, that I had been watching. And I go, in the video, you did this. In class and seminars, we practiced doing it this way. I found this. He goes, yes, you can. I started finding where I got trapped, and I started understanding when he talked about zoning of high-low. High-low is really important with an edge tool. I don't know if you shoot, but I've had guns in the family since I was little, and
Not
different
yet.
friends. I
It's
grew
on
up.
the bucket
Well, I'm a
list.
Connecticut guy like you. I grew up in Fairfield, so I grew up, that only 40 minutes from Colt. Ruger was around the corner.
With
My arms was around. Literally, I could walk from
gun
around the corner.
manufacturer. I know.
I come from
Not
Connecticut, the
anymore.
gun state.
Oh yeah, no,
From
not
the old
anymore.
days.
I know.
So, and I always understood, whatever's in front of your muzzle is destroyed. You don't point that at anything. What that's got to do with blades is because my grandfather had taught me, I knew you didn't put anything you don't want cut, and do not use a knife improperly, because knives are stupid. They're matter separators. You put something in front of them, they're cut. That affected, Remy said, blade will teach you the truth. Blade will set you free. And it did. It taught me an awful lot of stuff that I had done for years and thought I was doing properly, was incorrect with a blade in my hand because I'd cut myself. So one of the things I teach when I do modular, which is really what I think is Remy's conquistador art, his family art, I try to carry, and I'm blessed that I didn't inherit, I don't want to think I inherited any modern arnis. I have nothing to do with regular modern arnis in that sense. I didn't inherit it. I was never told I would get it. There's some of you want to fight about who, I'll mention names who tried to pretend they inherited modern arnis, and obviously they're long gone. Because a lot of us first generation went, we don't know who the hell you are, but if you're not Remy, you don't have it. Even the guys in the Philippines, I've gone there and I brought some of the guys from America there at the big festivals, and I had fights with them when I first met those guys going, you're not the grandmasters, and I don't bow down to you.
Yeah, yeah.
I was, I'm first generation. Like that's, and Roland used to laugh and go, "This is my little brother, Bram." When Remy, when I met him at one of the seminars, came through when I first coming out in public, came through and said, "I want everyone to know, said I'm Remy, not I'm Professor Presas. I'm Remy. You know, who are you?" And I said, "I'm Bram." He goes, "I'm going to be your friend for life." And we laughed because we had met before, but things had come up. And he brought me up front and used me for the day, beat me up, and I never said anything. And he goes, "Does this hurt?" And I said, "Yes." He goes, "Well, I didn't know what tapping out was. Whatever an
Mm.
instructor did to you, they did to me." So the very first time he grabbed me up, I tapped out and he said, "That doesn't hurt." And he cranked on me and I'm screaming. He goes, "That hurts." He goes, "I won't let go, but I won't do it less." Okay. So he had introduced me as his friend first. And I couldn't call him Remy. I could call him Professor. And my daughter used to sit on his lap and go, "Remy, Remy, Remy." He goes, "Daddy, you can't say it." He goes, "Bram, we are in your house. You can call me Remy.
Yeah,
After
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, that's my name." I said, "Sir, I can't. It's just one of these old personal things. You're my instructor, my mentor. I love you dearly."
Yeah, it's hard.
I
Yeah,
always said I
I'm the
loved
same
and
way.
kissed him and everything. And he would stay with me and we argued. Believe me, we argued. We'd scream at each other, we'd get mad, do whatever. But the reason I'm saying all that is after he passed, I was with Roland Dantes in Germany. And I went to Roland and said, "Look, I want to know the truth. If he really didn't like me," because there were all sorts of wars back then about who daddy liked best. And I said, "Look, I know lots of people tried to use him for claim and fame, and he would say whatever people wanted to hear to him. If he didn't like me, tell me." He was sitting there with his wife Cheryl, and he looks over and goes, "Bram, Remy told me to look at you and go, my name's Roland. You're Bram. I'm going to be your friend for life." And I looked at him. I
Mm.
gave him a big hug. He goes, "You remember him doing that to you?" I said, "Yes." And Roland and I started going to the Philippines with Roland, and Roland introduced me to people. But I had a different kind of relationship with him as I learned, and they gave me a chance, and that's how I got to meet Cristino. And Cristino is his first cousin. Renee's like a second cousin, Renee Tonks, and they all grew up in the same village. Cristino, I said, "You were the one in the Sipa hut with him." He goes, "Oh yeah, watching." He goes, "Remy told us he took the family bolos off the wall and brought them to you. He was going to give them." He said he took them from here to, he gave them to you. So I have his grandfathers and his uncles. I don't know which is which. They were used in
Mm.
World War II. One is like an inch longer than the other. They're light and fast, and they're really cool. But like I said, Remy gave me a choice because, as I said before, I got a part of me, I'm Cancerian, I go all around. That Arnis is the stick part is the beauty of the art. He said, you can have the soul of the art. And there were many, many times like I'd be with Bruce Chu, Roland Rivera doing stuff, and we're all first generation with him. And they go, "We don't
Yeah.
want to play knife with you. It's no fun." I go, "What do you mean?" Because what we do, he goes, "You cut us all the time." And he was just starting to teach left on right sparring, single stick sparring, which becomes what other people know as the tappy tappy. And I couldn't do it. Not that I can't physically do it, I may not do it. And I got that also
Mm.
from William Chung. I don't know if you've ever been with William Chung. William Chung is a very strange instructor. He does not let you beat him. He will not give you an opening. I said, "What are you doing?" I know instructors who said, "Here, I need you to enter here, get this hold on me, do whatever."
Yeah, yeah,
William's
yeah.
attitude was, "I won't let you because if I let you do it once, I might do it in real. I will never. You
Mm.
score on me, that's okay because you earned it, but I will not
Right.
let you be there." And I started learning about that attitude of you don't let I still let my students do it, but I got the idea. How you practice is what you really do. And
Mm.
Bolo taught me that I don't want to put in knives, I don't want to put my parts all of it gelled to be there. And when I structured what I called combat arnis, eventually becomes modular arnis. Um, really is. And I was teaching with Brian, and Brian looked up and goes, "Oh my God, you're doing tappy tappy with a knife." I said, "No, I'm not." He goes, "Yes, you are." Because what I got out, and because Remy grew up, you have to your left hand, you have to be able to use your left hand, and you have to do mirror. So he goes, you do right hand, left hand, and you have to know mirror. People go, "This is a one, this is a one." I said, "You can't have two ones." "Oh yeah, left hand." I said, "The counting isn't any different. If this is a one, this is a one, just with my left hand." And my
Mm.
impression, what I got from it, I don't know how other people didn't, was he was teaching us how to make sure our left-handed, right-handed motions. Because when he would spar and change hands, We're in our right hand. We're not changing. He's using his left hand. And if he didn't do right-handed motions with his left hand, we would have been blending.
Right.
You never run into the other person. It's physically impossible to, because the joints are folding in the same position. You have to
Right.
be counter the person. So, and because he was left-handed, that's how we could be doing right-handed drills, and we didn't even realize he changed hands because he used his left hand. I said you have to know what made your left hand do it. You mean
Mm.
use your left hand like a left-hander? No, that's mirror image. When you look
Yeah.
in a mirror and see it, your right hand is your left hand, and that's mirror image. That's left to left. That has nothing to do with what I call, we were doing a drill and no one's getting it. And I'm looking at him and I'm looking at him and I lean over and go, wrong hand. And he looks at me and goes, what? And I go, wrong hand. And he goes ahead and does this drill. Everyone's in their right hand and looking at him because the drill doesn't work. There's some kind of
Mm.
counter and into a disarm. I go, wrong hand. He looks at me, gets all, he goes, it's in my right hand. And he's holding up his left hand. I look at it and he goes, oh, because he couldn't tell left from right. He goes, everyone, you do this now. And everyone comes up to him and goes, what was that all about? And I said, never mind. But he comes and goes, oh, Bram, when it's in your left hand, it's backwards. And I looked at him. So when I finally figured out my position, standard right to right, backwards is left to right, mirror is left to left, and backwards is right to left. People went, what are you doing? I said, I figured out what he's teaching her and I brought it down. And he used to, like I said, he come to go, Bram, you've put it in an order. You put order to the chaos because fighting is
Mm.
really chaos. You can't act these structures, never the same twice. But it gave me a conceptual way to teach what he was teaching us and get people to understand it. And because he had geared me to teach police and military, you don't have months to teach them. You don't have years to
No,
teach them.
no. Yeah, because they're
You
not
have
right.
hours to teach them.
Mm.
If you get a one full day with a team, you're freaking lucky. They give you a week, that's like a blessing. But most of the time, I get a day or two
Yeah,
days.
you're in like,
And out of that
yeah, go.
those 2 days, I only see some guys on one day because someone's got to cover for them when they're on duty, or I see
Yeah,
them on the next day. And
right.
I learned a way to teach these people something really quickly that they could take because they got to go use it. And
Yeah.
that was the feedback. Remy goes, you get immediate feedback, and I do. And so that's why I said, Bruce Chu and Roland Rivera, Brian Few, I'm amazed what they do with sticks. Dan Anderson doesn't count because Dan Anderson let me corrupt him. Um, Dan decided to learn about blades, and Dan is one of the best instructors I've ever met. If you've never been with Dan Anderson, this guy's an instructor, and he came up. I told you he'd come to my house long ago, and his very first book from Youth Publications comes in. There's 2 copies on the shelf. One is beat the snot, underlined and noted, and I'm making drawings in there. He goes, you actually read it and use it because that's what he does with his books. He keeps one pristine, and it's one he makes notes in. He goes, you
Oh,
actually
okay.
read my book, and of course, I've read your book. We bonded right away, and I started at one point. I said Remy was a vagabond. I wrote a letter to everyone going, we should organize Remy into a schedule. Well, Remy had been betrayed in the Philippines a couple times. And it ended up with him being under a death threat. That's why he came to America. And they actually, believe it or not, the government hired Roland to kill him, not knowing Roland was one of his
I
friends. And
heard
Roland
something
got out
about
of the
that.
country.
Yeah.
But so when he was here, they were modern Arnese groups who didn't know each other. And Remy didn't want them to know each other. Because if there was a central core, he had learned from experience, it could go bad.
Mm.
So I was one of those vagabonds who went to all the different groups. And when I wrote a letter to everyone, the only one who wrote back to me on the back of the letter I sent out was Dan Anderson going, you got balls, but I think Remy's going to kill you, but here we go. And Dan and I have bonded ever since. I've learned a great deal from Dan. And remember one time we taught our first seminar together in Portland. And people go, oh my God, you guys must have trained together for years. Well, Luke said, actually, we've never trained together officially before this nor taught
Yeah.
together.
Huh.
What do you mean? I said, we're from Remy Presas from the days where we do cane inserts, cane takedowns. And I said,
Mm.
we're both first generation from the same period. There's some things Dan and I do very differently because I'm blade oriented. He was single stick fighting oriented, but technically we do the same. If people and we laugh because there's a group of us from that original. We're probably the second or third group of first generations because he was here from like 75. but there's a group of that we end up being the core that stuck with him and did stuff. And I'm not part of that tappy tappy. As everyone went off through tappy tappy, I cannot, because in tappy tappy you got to grab the blade. And I always send my students to go learn tappy
Yeah, I'm
tappy.
a blade guy. Yeah,
You cannot grab the tool. Well, let me
no.
correct that. You can. I was with a very famous person in Roland. We were in Europe. They said I want to do that with. That's why I got Odessa Ramos and a few people who have become parts of my family. And Odessa, actually fights in war. Her husband fights in war. I trained the teams with them there. But they were doing stuff, and this very famous guy got upset and said, "I can do that too." And Roland stood there and said, "Go ahead." And we start doing bolo work. And he immediately, upon contact, grabs my blade, tries to rip it out of my hand. Got the bolo, rips. And I said, "I win." Because what do you mean? I grabbed the tool. I said, "No, I win. As soon as you grabbed my blade, your fingers fell off. I won." And he kept doing that. He finally gets real upset, looks at me, goes, "I would never do that for real." I went, "Actually, you would." And that brings
You
up
were
this
doing it here.
when William Chung said he cannot do anything, he can't let you in because, and I thought he was such an arrogant person at first. What do you mean? How you train is what you do. So if you
Yeah,
train yourself upon impact to grab that tool and strip it, that you
yeah.
put
That
in
can be
and
a
pull that
magical
tool
switch.
out,
You just got to
and
hit.
you can't change. Under duress, we get stupid. We don't get smart.
Mm.
People in here said, so I teach simply stupid stuff. I teach you gross motor skill stuff. And said, "What are you doing?" I said, "My team members are going to have bombs going off, guns going off, people
Yeah, the
screaming,
fine
all sorts of
motors.
distractions.
Yeah,
So I got to keep it simple."
yeah, yeah.
So I teach
I totally
very
agree.
simple entries.
Yeah.
And the best thing I got going, Dean, is my guys who come back, um, that they come to me and go, "Your tool and or your training saved my life, my team's life, my spouse's
Yeah,
life."
because you're
That's
trying to
the best
get
feedback I can get.
overcomplicated.
Yeah. So, and I know it's sort of babbling all around, but modern or niche because Remy wanted to keep it simple and he wanted to be the art within your art. There's a bunch of people go, "Are you being disrespectful?" I said, "No, that's sort of like JKD. You guys got it wrong." None of us do the application overall the same or our entry, but we all have the same core. And that goes back to modular and paints. I only have black, white, red, yellow, blue. Those will never change. So I have 3 basic modules I teach that are based on Remy.
Mm-hmm.
One teaches they have to be high, the other teaches you have to be low, and the other teaches what to do against a backside, an open response and a closed response. And within that, because it's a modular system, if you find the common element, you can jump to it. So if you know the core, so it's learning I come from when they had the alphabet around the room in the
Mm-hmm.
classroom, and I had to learn how to print upper and lowercase and cursive because we had to learn cursive. Um, and as you know, we all learn that exactly the same. Then printing is the same. As soon as we start writing cursive, nobody writes the same. It's like learning a
Yeah.
language. As we learn words, we all start learning the same basic words. And once we start to talk, and I write the way I talk. I'm one of those. When I write my journals, people can tell it's me when I write my articles. I drive editors crazy because I write exactly as I talk. I
Mm-hmm.
use, I got lots of dots there. They get upset because that's my pause. That's, my cadence is different. Even if we used to read the same passage out of a book, my cadence isn't the same as yours. It's real easy to tell a Bram cadence.
Right.
So that comes out, but we all use the same A, B, C, D. There's only the basic letters. We only have 1 through 10 as digits, and of
Right.
course with the
Yeah,
0.
exactly.
And in anything, it's infinite. We only have black, white, red, yellow, blue, and it's an infinite palette. So I found the way that modular in my version of modern Arnis, and again, Remy's version, I didn't invent mine, he did it, the way I apply it, will never change. Most arts change because you have to do exactly what you're told. There's no freedom of expression. There's no commonality.
No,
So
yeah.
the way you add to it is you make it your own, and
Yeah.
truly it changes it over time, which is why I have so many different katas that came from the same source. But with this, a lot of us go, "You guys can't be the same." But those of us who took him for real that said, "Make it the art within your art," the
Mm.
core that we all teach the same thing. But we allow ourselves and our students the expression to express it differently, like language, like painting,
Yeah,
so
that's
that it may
fantastic.
look like it's different to an outsider. But if I ask you to show me 1, 4, 12,
Mm.
2-3-12, 1-2-2, high line, which is part of the, the tappy tappy drill. Actually, he looks up. We all teach exactly the same thing. He said, how come you guys, but you're all different? I go, no, we're not. We found a way that you take any of our arts, the core is identical. And we only teach the core. That way, if I teach to you, Dean can have Dean's Arnis. In 1,000 years from now, I can come back and go, show me Dean Modular. And Dean Modular, the core that you teach, is exactly the same as I taught you. There is no evolution of that part because they're core, gross biomechanical motions. And where they intersect and have a common element, you jump. So you speak the language, you use the colors. But if I ask you to show me, that core never changes. And Remy goes, how did you think that out? And I said, God bless the weird way I was brought up about a family that happens to be really big in education and happen to be a family of artists and believe in
Mm.
reading. And, I've told you, I showed you, I'm a good Menson kid. And, I have like 13 generations of Menson in my family. My uncle was so smart, he was almost an idiot savant, an inventor. My mom may be the smartest person I knew. My mom was in Intellitel and Triple Nines, and as well as Mensa, and she had made me come in. And I've got a few friends who are part of that group, and everyone thinks we're weird because, if we don't like something, we pay no attention to it. We're stupid.
Mm.
And at school, I did very poorly unless I liked something. But, they go, what's wrong with Bram? Because he's in, triple nine, 99.9th percentile. So I'm less
Yeah.
than
Just
1/10 of
interest
1%
level.
the way my brain works. And you've seen people go, we can't believe you invent all this stuff. When I first started wearing turbochargers and lasers as a little kid, because my dad exposed me to some of the stuff they were just inventing at GA, I went, oh, cool. I'm blessed that people like Isaac Asimov and Wolf Winton turned me on to John Carter of Mars, which is all about knives. And if you guys never read Edgar Rice Burroughs, Tarzan of the books is not Tarzan of the movies. And I love Johnny Weissmuller because I was a swimmer, so he was a hero for us. But he was, Tarzan was stupid in the movies. Tarzan's not stupid in the books. And of course, what makes Tarzan different is Tarzan has a Bowie knife. Tarzan's Bowie knife
Mm.
makes him superior to all the other animals, and he carries that Bowie knife everywhere, always. So that's what I mean. I said Tarzan set me up. This was a smart person who learned on his own. A typical Menson. I read, therefore I am, because he taught himself by reading.
Ah. Okay.
And what made him different was he carried a knife. John Carter of Mars, the first book I was brought into, and Wolf Winton, who lived around the corner, and his wife, she was the head librarian, Ruth. And my mom was a teacher in the school system. He was part of a group of other writers, and one of them was Isaac Asimov, who I was blessed to go see his early speeches about robotics and his early books. And they used to bring books to me. They used to pass books in a little club and sign each one. If I'd known they were
Mm.
all they were really famous, I should have saved the books. They told me to keep them. But as a little kid, I wanted to be part of the club, so I put my own books in there, sign my name, and give them to them so they get back to me. But they turned me on to Edgar Rice Burroughs, and they turned me on to A Fighting Man of Mars about Tan Hedron Hester. And I read sci-fi, and this sci-fi is not about ray guns. This is sci-fi about swords and knives
Mm.
and warriors. And I'm like, you got to be kidding. And then I read the trilogy of Princess of Mars. I always think I learned my ethics, everything I do from John Carter. My ultimate hero, my soul is John Carter of Mars. And Edgar Rice Burroughs actually, he was a military man, part of the U.S. cavalry. That's why the red men, he was so enamored with the Indians. The red men are the noble race. The bad guys are the white guys with the old, the Therns who are actually bald, who have
Mm.
the wigs like the old colonial people. Um, but anyways, it taught me I had a love, and this guy, so my sci-fi love was built on swords and knives. My heroes had swords and knives, and they
Yeah,
often.
yeah.
John Carter never gives up. Tarzan never gives up. Wile E. Coyote never gives up. Ultimate Faith and Acme products. I know some of that sounds weird, but all of it affects became me. I make all my
No, 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 no. I mean, yeah,
requirement
I'm
to
sure.
read,
Obviously.
the first three novels, the trilogy of Princess of Mars, The
Mm.
Gods of Mars, and The Warlord of Mars. And they go, why? And it goes, because then you'll understand me. I think I've told you, my house is filled with Edgar Rice Burroughs' original stuff, and all that affected how I put together Modern and how I viewed Remy. So I figured that back to Clarence Murray. Clarence Murray made sound effects. When I first met Remy go, ah, kapa, badai. And people go, what's this guy doing? He made sound effects. And it wasn't strange because Clarence Murray did it. So I had just been named Black Belt's Weapons Instructor of the Year back in 2007. So I went to look up Clarence Murray and said, I don't know if you remember me. He goes, yes, I do, from Minnesota. Of course. I spent all those many, many months training with you. And I said, well, I want to thank you because of you teaching me weapons and encouraging me.
Oh, it started the whole, I gotcha.
You really prepped me with your sound effects. And when I met Remy, I went,
You were
because I
prepared
was with
for it.
Clarence in like 76. I was like, oh my God, you opened the door. And he stopped and went, I want you to know, every instructor dreams of someone like you, a student. He goes, you've gone way past me. And of course I was going, no, I haven't. And Clarence went, Bram, I've seen your knives. I've read about you. I saw you made it. He goes, this is the thing that parents and instructors want, is to know that they open the door for a student. And they not only
went,
you've
and they went
leveled.
beyond.
Yeah, so Clarence is still one of my dearest friends. I love him very, very much.
Yeah.
And I always want to make sure I mention
Maestro, we're up, we're going beyond an hour and a half.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No worries. No, nothing to be sorry about. But for part 2, for Thursday, can you bring your knives? Because I want to cover your knives and your books. All right. Perfect. So how about for part 2? Beauty. Oh, so all right. Well, there we go. So for part 2, I figured your knives and books. How's that sound to you?
Yeah, I'll concentrate on knives and books and why I design the knives and how they fit.
No worries. This was fantastic. I mean, really.
Okay.
I mean, no worries. Yeah. So everybody that's watching, I thank you. And yes,
I'm
there
sorry
also is gonna be a part 2.
I babbled a whole bunch. I'm sorry.
No apologies necessary. Really. But for the part 2, Maestro's going to cover his knives and his books. So I highly urge you to Thursday. And Thursday will be 7 as opposed to 7:30. So I appreciate those who are watching. And yeah, I mean, we're going to be covering those books, especially on the 100.
I also have the Filipino Grandmaster book. I forgot to grab it, but that's okay. We'll go over books and knives.
So this one here, as I'm this is the one I really wanted.
Yeah, exactly. That's in the other room. I forgot to grab it. That's the one that's got the forward from the president in it. Because I got to meet President Aquino.
Because this is the one I wanted to definitely spend some time on. So don't worry.
Yeah, we will. I'll make sure I have it. And that's the one you saw that I actually was one of the ones who did the flag wrong because I had to learn about the flag. I went to put it on the cover, and President Aquino and back then Garatoni, my little brother Garatoni, Grandmaster Garatoni Nicholas went, the flag is backwards. I went, no, it's not. And that's how everyone had printed it in America, the Filipino flag. So the president went, I will not sign it, do a forward for your book, and you can't unless you correct that. So I went, that's why it has all the chapters about how to use the Filipino flag and the proper colors. And I realized that someone at some point on the internet had flopped the image to make it fit something they did.
Therefore, that
so on the cover, I flopped it back so that the colors are correct.
Yeah. So no, definitely. So we're gonna be covering that. So again, Thursday, part 2 at 7, and we're gonna be covering all that, and definitely come because I'm actually looking forward to all that. But I want to thank you for coming on. This has been absolutely wonderful. And so Thursday it is.
Okay. I will see all of you then. Thank you very much. Is this Tuesday?
Correct.
Okay, so I have a day tomorrow. I'm not on. I'm on Thursday.
Absolutely. Thursday at 7.
I'm old. I'm a dinosaur. I got to make sure.
No, don't worry. I'm going to send another flyer out. So no worries.
Okay.
No worries.
All right. Thank you. Good night to you all. Thank you so much. And I'll read all the comments later because I'm so busy. I didn't actually read any of the comments.
Yeah, no worries. I missed some too. So no worries.
Okay.
But Thursday it is.
Okay. Right, I'll see you Thursday. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, folks. Yeah. So Thursday at 7, that'll be part 2. We're gonna cover his knives, his beautiful knives, and his book. And just while you guys are still watching, Brian, yes, I'll bring up the ice cream cart music. Okay, I'll bring that up Thursday. And Maestro Joe, Bram talks. I'm gonna leave it for you to tell him that, Maestro Joe. I'm gonna leave that out. Yeah, and Brian, I have to. This week looks pretty good as far as getting up there because I want to see Bram's knives as well. But okay, folks, thank you for watching. And again, if you haven't, hit like and subscribe to FMA Discussion on YouTube. And I'll see you all Thursday. Thank you for jumping in.